Once the creative process takes hold of you, embrace it, because that's the essence of who you are as a person.
Hey, Lorenzo.
What's up, bro?
How's it going?
Excellent, man.
Good
How are
to see
you?
you.
Back
Hey,
at
great.
you. Hi, my name is Lorenzo Pace. I'm here in my studio in Williamsburg, New York City. One of the founders of the Loft area in this area back in 40 years ago or more. It's been a challenging process, but I've enjoyed the ride. I made this for my son, you know, when he was like 9 years old. And this swing, when I feel good, I can get up there and jump on it, but I can't do it. I was sharing a studio on Berry Street, down the street. So me and my friends said, hey, let's try to find a studio together. And we looked and looked, and we found this spot. My other friend said, well, you know, I don't want to do it. So I said, well, I'm going to do it. Neighborhood completely transformed. You know, you had a lot of drugs and hookers and everybody else in the neighborhood. In Williamsburg, nobody wanted to be here. When the artists move into an area, the big boys follow because they know that that's what the trend is. And the artists always set the trend. When I first saw Times Square, man, blew me away. All the lights, all the stuff, like that, wow. So it stayed with me. So when you walked in the studio and you see the LEDs, that's the spirit of New York. I was born in Birmingham, Alabama, in the real South, where Martin Luther King wrote his famous speech from the Birmingham jail. My family moved from Birmingham of the last migration from the South to get away from the racist ideology that was going on in Birmingham at that time. And we moved to Chicago. And this is to honor one of the most greatest jazz musicians in the world, Charlie Parker. And all these things that relates to his life. And he loved a lot of women. That's one of his things he just loved, man, you know? And you look at the other aspects of, these are all icons from the Apollo Theater. Stevie Wonder, when he was a kid with the dark glasses on. Dionne Warwick, Odetta, that guy there, Sam Cooke. These are all icons that performed at the Apollo Theater. They discarded these objects, and I just happened to be driving by the Apollo, and I took them out of the container and brought them back to the studio. When Martin Luther King came to Chicago, he said that Chicago was more racist than in Birmingham. The blacks used to live on the south side, whites used to live on the north side. When he gave a speech in Soldiers Field in Chicago, I was right there. I marched with him, and where he was stoned in Marquette Park, me and my friends was right there marching with him. Once I finished high school, I went to Paris, man. I didn't even know the French spoke French until I got off the plane. But I stayed there a year, and art was just literally everywhere. That's what really turned me on to the arts. I was inspired when I was in Paris. I saw this piece. I was looking at it, but I didn't think it was an iconic artist until I got back to the States and said, shit, this is it's Picasso. It kind of like really set me off. Then I came back to Chicago. I felt that I could do something. One day hanging out in the park with a buddy of mine, so we went to his house. He had some wood on his fireplace, and so I asked him, could I play around with it? Because I didn't know that I could really be an artist. And I started making a piece. I was enthralled by the process of just wood carving. I took it home to my wife. She said, oh, come on, man, you didn't make this. I said, yes, I did. She said, well, if you did, make me another one. So that was the challenge for my life, right there. And so I began to make another piece. I got really obsessed. The thing out in the hallway, it says, come play with me. Never forget, life and art is to play. That's what I like to do, man. I like to play. And I generally work on 2 or 3 pieces at the same time, not just one piece. I just worked independently for many years, and then I had enough collective work to show in the Community Art Center. The dean of the University of Illinois came and saw my show and said, wow, yeah, boy, you got some talent here. I said, wow. A friend of the dean's, she said, hey, why don't you go back to school? I got accepted. I went to University of Illinois for about a year and a half, something like that. Then I left, and I went to the Arts of Chicago. Shocked my own self, because I didn't think that I was university material. I was there for about a year, and they said, well, you know, we think you graduate material now. And they just gave me my undergraduate degree and put me directly into graduate program. Graduate school really opened me up to exploring all kinds of materials that I never thought I could explore. And that's what I love. It's the fact that I can't tell the material what to do. To a certain extent you can, but it has its own voice. At some point it said, okay, either I'm gonna kick your ass or you gonna kick my ass. Which one it is? I said, okay, I'm the creator. You ain't gonna kick my ass. So we come to a mutual agreement. Everything is cool. The president of the Arts to Chicago came down and said, oh, Lorenzo, I think you should go and get your doctorate. And gave me a full scholarship. So although its progression has been one thing after another, what I call my organic life. And it just went from one thing to another. I don't know when it's gonna end. I don't know how it's gonna end, but I know I have an idea. And that's all you got. And you go with the idea. And sometimes the idea don't work, and sometimes it does. My real story starts with that lock. I go back to Birmingham to bury my father in 1991. And we all sitting around the dinner table talking about my father's life, and my uncle, he all of a sudden said, Mary, do you have, my mother, do you have a bag in the house? He had given my father 35 years ago. My mother knew exactly what he was talking about. She goes into the bedroom, come back with this bag. My uncle go into the bag and pull out this lock and said this lock was given to him by his father, which was given to him by his father, the slave in our family. Phew. And so the family decided that I'd be keeping the lock. Well, they said, well, you're the artist in the family, maybe you can do something with it. What am I gonna do with it? I don't know. Throw it in the closet and say, oh, I don't want to deal with this. Then one day, my daughter, who was about 8, came home from school one day and said, hey, Daddy, asked me a question. Are we from slaves? I said, why are you asking a question like that for me, girl? Because the kids were making fun of me. And so I said, hey, sweetheart, you don't have to be ashamed of yourself. Ignored on me. And so I said, oh, I have the lock. I said, let me try to see if I can. I went to the closet, snatched that lock out, and began to write this little story about a little boy taken from Africa, brought to the Americas, in locked and chained, and got his freedom. Started in Africa. Now the Loft is in the Smithsonian African American Museum in Washington, D.C. to this day. I came back to New York. They discovered the African burial ground. Big article in the New York Times. Slavery, they discovered the big African burial ground, go back to the 1800s, in the very from beginning of New York City, the oldest burial ground in the country. It's like, wow, major discovery for this country, especially from New York. Comes out from New York was the second largest slave port in this country, New York City. The government was building a federal office building on that site. The Supreme Court office is right there. The mayor's office is a half a block away. The entire judicial system for the city is right there, right in the heart of the city. They had a big fight in Washington, D.C. about stopping the project. And one of the great senators, Gus Savage, said, hey, stop the project. You're not going to disrespect my ancestors. The government said, hey, okay, all right. You got these black folks upset. We got to do something. So we got to have a call out for an artist to build a monument to honor those ancestors. Over 400 artists applied for that spot. And I got the call. Okay, what am I going to do? I kept looking at this piece right here. It kept taking up a number of different African countries embrace this concept. This is basically on a Charow. This is a male and a female. This is the female. And the female carried the baby on her back, which represents the next generation. And I said, I like this, the concept behind it. And so I said, well, I can't copy it. I said, okay, I'm gonna go with the female. The boat is at the bottom, which represents first Native American, second the immigrants, and the third, me, and my enslavement coming from Africa to Americas. And at the very top of the boat sits the Charow. The big two horns and the small two horns in the back represent the baby. That was contemporary abstraction, so I just put that together. A slave memorial in secrecy. Wow. Shrouded for months, memorial to be unveiled. Our mayor at the time was Giuliani. He wanted to unveil the monument on Columbus Day. He said, yeah, we feel Columbus is cool. I said, well, I don't feel he's cool. He started the whole process of enslavement here in this country, starting with the Native Americans and, so on and on. He went ahead and did the celebration against my will. And I rewrapped the monument, and we did our celebration the following week. And we had all the community, the black community, the politicians, everybody celebrate on that day. Getting it built after 10 years, celebrating after a year being wrapped, and we finally got it done. That is the story of the monument. Triumph of the human spirit. For New York, freedom for the world. One of my last aspects of this whole dynamic is to officially name that site from Police Square to the African Square.
Do you play any instruments, Lorenzo?
I'm sorry?
Do you play any instruments?
Yes. You want me to show you?
Yeah, I would love that.
When Nelson Mandela came out of the prison, they celebrated using the liberation horn. I like to play, man. And I taught myself how to do just that. How to play instruments, how to play with art, how to play with sound, how to play with rhythm, how to play with different concepts. Before I be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free, and be free, and be free. And freedom finally came. We're free, we're free, we're free.
What's the story behind the airplane?
My brother was a colonel in the U.S. Air Force, and he was taking his plane. He had his own prop plane, and the plane hit a mountain and took both of his wife and himself out. That's the essence of the plane. To honor my brother and his wife, a part of the museum exhibition entitled Honor Thy Father and Thy Mother. These are all pieces that I did that relates to, well, especially the Black Lives Matter situation where all these young people were killed. Freddie Gray, Trayvon Martin, killed by the police, Sin Bell, and of course, George Floyd. We thought our country was really moved forward, and now we're seeing like we're trying to move backwards. And that's my artist statement there, right there. This is my family. My father was a minister in the church, so I come out of that. And this is my daughter's wall here. She did this when she was about 14, 15, something like that. And she just did this whole wall to celebrate her friends. Sometimes I feel a sense of what was it like for my ancestors to come through from Africa to the Americas in a horrific chain together, couldn't move, defecated, couldn't do anything. I think about the suffering. Then I think about from what we have come. And I feel a sense of empowerment. I feel a sense of jubilation because you never give up. And I started a draft copy of the making of the monument. And you'll see in this me having a ceremony to embed a bronze replica of the lock at the base of the monument. So at the bottom of the monument that you see downtown is a replica of the lock. That symbol connects my family from Alabama, Tuskegee, to the enslaved population here in New York. That spot will be there when you're gone, I'm gone, and if it comes down, you'll see the lock buried in that site.
I'm thrilled to announce that my newest photography book, Artist in Residence, is now available for pre-order at the link in the description. The book is the newest and largest collection of my photographs documenting artists who have spent decades in some of the most unique and imaginative live-work spaces in New York City. The book features photographs of Lorenzo Pace and all of the artists that have been in my newest videos. Artist in Residence is expected to ship in early 2026, but if you pre-order now, you'll get $10 off each copy. Your pre-orders will also help me to continue to fund this photography project and create these films. Thank you so much for all of your support.